This podcast is proudly brought to you by Term Plus. What I like about Term Plus is its easy to use online platform, giving you access to high yield term-based accounts, providing consistent monthly income. Owned and operated by Pengana, an ASX listed company with 23 years of experience, Term Plus is democratizing access to global private credit markets. Visit termplus.com.au to learn more and read the PDS before investing.
My guest today is Jon Pilcher from Neuren Pharmaceuticals. The ticker code is NEU. Jon is the CEO of Neuren, a company that has developed a drug for Rett Syndrome. This drug is now in market in the US, and with the cash flows from the sales, it is now able to undertake the development of its next drug, which they believe has the ability to service a much larger market. In this conversation, we go deep into the families Neuren is helping, the life cycle of developing a drug, and how NEU is not your typical pharmaceuticals business where investors are left with a binary outcome. This conversation is also quite a personal one, as I've been following the work of NEU for years now due to the syndromes they treat being in my family. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jon Pilcher. So Jon, tell me about the families that Neuren help. What does Neuren actually do?
Yeah, and look, this is the most important thing, and everyone is highly motivated to make a difference here. So all of these disorders that we're working in, that you either have them genetically from birth, or in one case from brain injury that happens at birth, but it disrupts the communication in the brain. So it affects just about everything. So walking, talking, sleeping, breathing, eating, to whatever extent, are all impacted. So it's terrible burden really on the patients and their families for life. Fortunately, they're not typically fatal, but obviously that means a lifelong burden. So we're trying to have an impact across the syndrome. We're not trying to treat one particular symptom. We're trying to have an impact across the syndrome, and it can be a different impact in different people.
And so the DAYBUE, the drug that you've currently got on shelves for people, that predominantly targets Rett syndrome. Is that correct?
Yes, it's only Rett syndrome. It's the first ever drug approved for Rett syndrome in the US.
Can you tell us a bit about Rett syndrome and what that might look like in someone with Rett syndrome?
Yeah, so again, it can be variable between individuals, but one big thing is communication. So many Rett girls will be completely non-verbal. Some will be able to say a few words, a few sentences, and some at the more extreme end can't even communicate with the eyes. So there's no sort of connection. So that's a massive thing for the families. So that is one thing we've seen improvements on across that whole spectrum, depending on where they are, which makes a massive difference to families.
And so when they start taking DAYBUE, what does that look like, those improvements?
So in all those settings, if they can say some words, they'll be able to say more words. If they can't have that connection with the eyes, they'll start making that connection and be able to understand instructions and communicate that they have understood instructions. So you're not curing any of this stuff, but it is making enough improvement to make a real difference to people. And communication is only one thing. Motor is another big thing, so both gross motor and fine motor, so walking, but also hand use. Hand use is a big problem in Rett syndrome, so being able to hold a spoon so you can feed yourself or draw something is something that many just are not capable of doing, and we've seen them being able to do that.
So that quality of life, that improvement, just being able to communicate with your family or feed yourself, that is huge. I don't think it's hard to fathom actually how big a difference that would make in someone's life.
No, it is. And there's a prominent blogger, amazing mum and her daughter. So she was in our first ever trial in Rett syndrome and is now on the drug many years later, and her mum has blogged about it ever since.
What's her name? So just in case we want to look her up.
So the daughter is Caitlin, and the mum is Melinda, and there's a blog at Trail to a Texas Trial where she described all this. But to just give you an example, so Caitlin going to school, had to get on a bus, and for many years had to be helped out of the house, helped onto the bus, and got to the point where she could open the door, walk down the path, get on the bus herself, and which again, it doesn't sound
no, it doesn't
amazing,
sound,
but it is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so tell us about, we'll talk about Daybue because that is the current drug in market. It's also from an investment company perspective, it's the drug right now that is providing cash flow, the lifeblood to the business. How is it administered?
So that's one big advantage. It's a twice daily oral liquid, and it's not like a syrup like many medicines. It's more like a sort of a cordial. So it's a strawberry flavored cordial and relatively small volume. So they just drink that twice a day, basically. Okay.
So I was actually thinking about it because, knowing people with these syndromes, I'd imagine if they didn't like the taste of it, that's it.
Yeah. No,
it's not happening. No, so that's one hurdle to adherence, which is a big issue with drugs in general, speaking, is keeping that adherence up.
Right.
So it's palatable.
Yes. Yeah. We never had a problem with that. So it's good.
Yeah. Fantastic. And is it available in Australia, David?
Well, not sort of formally. So it's not approved by the TGA and on the PBS. Unfortunately, these sort of drugs, it's quite rare that they do follow that path. It's not a great environment here for that, unfortunately. But Acadia started a named patient program in countries around the world where, some people can get access to it, has to be paid for, and that does include Australia. So I'm hoping the drug will get here in some form, but it's not broadly available.
But it is on the shelves in the US. So how is it administered in the US?
So Acadia has a single specialty pharmacy that basically sends direct to the family's house their medication for a month, which is a bottle. So they know exactly where every bottle's going, and there's no inventory out there. It's just straight to the families.
And just to give people a bit of an idea, specifically say with Rett syndrome, how many people currently with Rett syndrome in the US, and what are the percentages of how many born each year? With that? Yeah,
so the theoretical prevalence is between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 15,000 females. So it does affect males rarely. There are some males, but predominantly it's females, and that's the prevalence, which means we all think there's about 6,000 to 9,000 in the US. Currently diagnosed is a different number, which is less, but it's growing towards that number. So about between 5,500 and 5,800 is where we think it is now. And that used to be much lower than that, when we first started working in Rett. So with all of these things, when you've got no treatment, there's no incentive to diagnose, and it often gets misdiagnosed as something else. And genetic testing, was very poor years ago. It's getting much better now, obviously. So they tend to, the numbers of diagnosed patients just sort of snowballs as you go through this process.
And what is the cost of Daybue to the patient, or what is it? I presume it's not, especially in the US, it's probably not the patient paying for it. It'd be insurance or whatnot. How does that work, and what's the cost?
Yeah, correct. So it's about 2/3 of the patients would be covered by Medicaid, which is the government program that covers kids, state-based program, and the rest would be private health insurance. And typically there's a small copay with Medicaid, and there's typically probably be no copay or a very small one with private health insurance. So it's really not costing the families much at all. It's funded by Medicaid or the insurers. But it is expensive. I mean, it's about $400,000 per annum is the cost, which is paid for by those settings. And so again, with orphan drugs, the whole point is that if they were priced the same as other drugs and the volume is small, then no one would ever develop them. So that's part of the way that they get developed.
Just going back to $400,000 a year, and this is something that you take ongoing.
Yes.
Once you're on it, you're pretty much on it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Is it something that can be? So there's a lot of, because it's come into the market in the last few years. There's obviously a lot of people with, say, a lot of females with Rett syndrome, say in the States, as adults now.
Yep.
Can they start taking it as adults, or is it something they have to start taking as kids?
No, they can. I mean, we've seen in all our trials, we've seen improvements across the age range. And in fact, the example I talked about, I mean, Caitlin's, she's well past childhood, she's, so yeah, I think, everyone would think theoretically the younger you treat, the better, but we've certainly seen impacts across the age range.
Okay, so let's now jump into the explanation of what an orphan drug is.
Yeah, sure. And this is critical. This underpins our whole business model. So, as I said, if with these conditions where the numbers are small, numbers of people are small, people just wouldn't develop them unless there were some incentives. So the US set up, and it's been copied around the world. You've got the same thing in Europe and Japan, orphan drug designation, which gives you three things really. One is a more favourable regulatory environment. So, and the typical example would be usually you've only got to do one phase 3 clinical trial, whereas by the book you do 2 phase 3 clinical trials. And it's just more of a negotiation as to how much evidence you need to get approval. And then the other thing is you get, they'll review your application 6 months instead of 10 months, so you get to market sooner. And then a really important one is that they give you extra protection against generics, because in pharma, one of your big risks is that a generic company comes and, you've spent all this money and got there, and they'll come and attack your patents and try and take it away from you. The regulators give you periods where even if you've got no patents, they won't approve a generic. So 7.5 years in the US, 12 in Europe, 10 in Japan. So that gives you, comfort that you're going to have the time to make your investment back.
And so how long has Daybue been in the market then?
So it's improved in 2023. So we're coming up for nearly 2 years.
Okay. And so you've got that 7 and a bit year runway before generics can come into the market. Is that correct?
And look, we've got patents. So we've got, patent for the treatment of Rett Syndrome that runs out to 2036. We've got other patents around the manufacturing and other aspects of it. So we have got patents.
So you've got protections in place.
Yeah, we
have.
We have. But just in that period, you've got ultimate protection, which helps, obviously.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. And so I'd imagine a lot of listeners, like myself actually, we're kind of grown up value investors and whatnot, and pharma or biotechs as well often will get put in the category of, say, some more speculative style of investing. And it's not something that a lot of people would pay attention to. We're told to stick in our lane, circle of competence, that sort of thing. Yeah. Can you maybe educate us a bit about the actual process of bringing one of these drugs to market? We can talk maybe in the context of Daybue or in the context of the new drug that you're currently developing. And I'm going to get this wrong. It's NNZ-2591.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
That's correct. Very good. Very good. Very good.
Either of those, take either of those. Yeah. And maybe walk us through the different stages that it takes to get on the shelves.
Yeah. So look, and maybe I won't start at the beginning. I'll come back to the beginning. So the thing that most people know about is clinical trials. And so you do your clinical trials, and then you've got to submit the application to the regulator, and then they'll take, 10 months to a year to review it. And in those clinical trials, different stages. So phase 1 trials is where you trial the drug in healthy volunteers to check the safety of it and work out, do you get the same amount of drug in the blood as you predict? So you can measure all of that in those phase 1 trials. Then you go to phase 2 trials, which is patients, and there you're still proving safety in patients, but having a first look at efficacy. Does it work, and to what extent does it work, and how do you measure that? And then you go to your phase 3 trial, where with all that information, you design your phase 3 trial to give you your statistical significance on this, however you're measuring it. And that's your big bet. And the cost escalates as you go through that process. But before you even get there, there's a huge body of work, which is, can you manufacture it reliably so you're making the same thing every time and to the right quality? Does it have any off-target effects on things? And you can look at that sort of in vitro, and unfortunately still there's some animal testing involved here, and again looking at safety before it gets into humans. So there's a whole lot of work that takes a few years before you even get into clinical trials. So yeah, it's a long and difficult road, but and again, that's the beauty of orphan drug designation, that you at least can shortcut some of that, which we've obviously taken advantage of the most we can. So. And
even before then, Daybue, which it's its shelf name, but it's got a different name from when it was developed.
Yeah, Trofenetide.
Yes. Trofenetide began its actual life how long ago at the University of Auckland?
Yeah, a long time ago. Well, to be honest, 2591 did as well. They were both invented in the labs at Auckland, some very clever chemistry. And it's more than 20 years ago. It's like 25 years ago. Yeah.
It's taken 25. So, it's been Debu's been on the shelves for a few years now. So it's essentially a 23-year journey.
Yeah. Now, having said that, it's there's some quirks as to why it's taken that long. So
is that not normal, or?
I would say normally, 15 years would be comfortably what it would take, maybe more. It can take 20. But for example, 2591 pretty much stayed on the shelf until after we did the deal with Acadia, and we were able to take it off the shelf. So 2019 was where we really started going for it. So we should be able to get to market in 9 years, which is quick. It doesn't sound quick, but it is quick. Whereas Debu had a whole life as a brain injury treatment before neurodevelopmental disorders were even thought of. So that's not a typical journey. So.
When you do approach these clinical trials, what's your confidence levels going into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3? Like, how do you be assured that, because you're essentially, you're taking a risk,
yep.
and there's always the risk that it could get knocked back at any one of these trials. So
sure.
What's the confidence levels coming in there, and how can you be more assured of your chances of getting through?
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, that's all the work you do is trying to reduce the risk of the next stage. And so, and the risk should drop as you go through the process. By the time you get to your phase 3 trial, you should be pretty confident. So, with R1s in particular, you can create mouse models of the syndromes where the mice behave completely differently to the normal mice because they've got the genetic abnormality, and you can treat. And so in our case, we've done those models, got amazing results, that it corrected all of these problems. So that gives you confidence that it's going to work as well as the scientific theory, but then you don't know for sure until you get into humans. And that phase 2 trial is probably the key thing, because phase 1, you'd certainly hope you've done all your safety assessments before you get into phase 1. You're not really expecting a problem there. Phase 2 is where the rubber hits the road, and is it going to work? And then, as I said, by the time you get to phase 3, if you've designed it properly and done all the work appropriately, you should be pretty confident by then.
And with Debu, you actually partnered with Acadia. You've mentioned the name Acadia a couple of times here. Yep. So I think it's important in the context of the listeners to explain, when did that partnership start? Who are Acadia, and what do they do with Neuren? Yeah,
so look, it's an absolutely critical part of our journey. So Debu, we developed that to the end of phase 2. So we'd done those phase 2 trials I talked about. And we also went to FDA and agreed what needed to be done as the final stage to get approval. And that's the point that we partnered with Acadia. I'll come back to why. But Acadia is a NASDAQ-listed company. They're not big pharma. They're sort of mid-size. And one thing they specialise in neurology for a start, so in this sort of stuff. But one thing that attracted us to them is that this was going to be really important to them strategically. This was a move for them into rare disease and into neurology. A lot of their stuff up to then had been psychiatry. So we knew they were going to put everything into it, whereas often when you partner with a big pharma company, it sort of disappears into a portfolio of products and it might never see the light of day. And we were adamant we needed this drug to get there for the Rett patients that we'd had that relationship with. So they really then have done everything since then. So they took all the funding of the remaining thing, all the execution, and then they took it through the FDA. They're marketing it. They're doing all the sales. And so from that point, really, we've just taken royalties and milestone payments, which has been very lucrative for us. And again, we might come back to that. But as for the decision to partner, so Neuren at that stage, we were tiny. We were 10 people if we were lucky. We had very little cash. We didn't really have the market support to go out and raise a huge amount of money. And there was also some aspects of the manufacturing of Debu that needed a lot of money spent on them to get it to commercial stage. And we just didn't have the capability to do that. So we really at that point had no option other to partner. So whereas it's very, very different now, as you mentioned earlier with 2591, it's a completely different situation. But back then it was the right thing to do. And It's interesting. I'll never forget this day. The day we announced the deal with Acadia, the share price halved. People hated it.
Really?
Yeah, because and I think mainly they'd never heard of Acadia. And secondly, we didn't get much upfront because of all the investment they had to make and all the risks they had to take. So it was very back-ended. So the market hated it, but we always knew if you got to the back end, it was going to be extremely lucrative, and we were confident we would get to the back end, but it did mean, a few years to wait for the returns, which people didn't like at the time, but with hindsight, it's been excellent for us.
So looking at the cash flow from DAYBUE,
yeah.
Do you get cash flow just from the ongoing sales of it, or does that go to Acadia and you get these milestone payments from Acadia? So what does that look like?
So it's two things. So we get royalties on every sale. And it's between 10 and 15% of sales in North America, and outside North America, when it gets there, it will be from mid-teens to low 20%. So
it's only in the shelves in North America currently.
Correct.
Yeah.
But expecting approval in Europe in the first quarter next year, and then Japan's following on behind that. So those royalties on their own are very lucrative for us. We have no cost attached to it, so they go straight to pre-tax profit. But then we do get one-off milestone payments as well. So we've had very big milestone payments, in the past couple of years, and then there's more to come. So the first year sales hit $500 million in North America. We'll get another $50 million one-off payment on top of the royalties. And when we get approval in Europe and they make the first sale, we get a $35 million one-off payment. So you're getting these supplements, which again, straight to pre-tax profit on top of the royalties. So, it has completely transformed us financially. But as I said, investors had some years to wait before that arrived. So
yeah, if anyone goes and has a look at the NEU price chart, it's a bit of a roller coaster,
yes.
But quite a positive one at the end of the day for investors. There was a couple of years where NEU was actually the best performing stock on the ASX, full stop.
That's right.
It's funny, I had my eye on you a couple of years prior to that, given the family background.
Yeah.
But did I buy a single stock? No.
Oh, no. I'm sorry about that.
But what's interesting now, though, is the cash flows from the royalties, from those milestone payments from Acadia. That is now underpinning the development. And
yeah.
Oh, geez, I have to be careful of how I say this, but not quite taking the risk out, but kind of it's got those cash flows to sustain the development of the next drug, which is NNZ-2591, which we'll explain to people what that is in a minute.
Yep.
And so you're not having, as a CEO, you're not having to go around Collins Street here with hat in hand, asking investors for capital raising and things like that. It must put you in a much more comfortable position, because cash burn is a significant thing when you look at biotechs and pharmaceutical businesses.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been in that position before in the past, and so it is a very privileged position we have, and we need to make the absolute most of it. But it is, I guess my preaching to investors now is that I really think you can have the best of both worlds here, because you've got this, ongoing cash generation and cash balance that gives you
that stability, that underpinning.
A backstop of the valuation. So often when you're chasing a big outcome, which we think this can be a massive outcome with 2591, often if you're chasing that, it's binary and your downside risk is 100%. That's not the case here. You've got this backstop of the valuation. And then the other thing is often to chase that and go through that process that I've described, you're facing multiple capital raisings, so you're getting a smaller and smaller share of it. Again, you don't face that here. We can fund it ourselves. So I do think it's a privileged position both for us and investors.
Do you know the numbers? And sorry, it's okay if you don't, because it's just come to me off the top of my head. What is the rate of people who start DAYBUE and stick on it?
Yeah, no, we do have those numbers. Katie put those out. So currently, after 12 months of treatment, there's above 50% of them are still on and continuing. And if people are going to drop out, it's normally early on.
Why do they drop out? So
with DAYBUE, there's one, mostly it's because of one side effect with DAYBUE, which we don't have with 2591, which is one of the reasons why we have such high conviction about 2591, it's GI side effects and diarrhea in particular.
Right.
Now, it doesn't affect everyone, and it's, again, wide variety of its mildness or not. And there are a lot of strategies to deal with it, both sort of dietary and titrating up the dose. So you start on half the dose and titrate up carefully. And when DAYBUE first launched, that wasn't really communicated.
It was just bang, here it is, have it.
There was such massive demand because there'd never been a treatment before. And so we did get a lot of discontinuation early in those days. But
Is that improved over time?
Yeah, and it's improving all the time. And we think right now, someone starting has got a much better chance than that of staying on. And I think hopefully when it launches in Europe, all of those learnings will be put into place for the launch. So yes, at the moment, the last time Acadia reported is about 980 odd patients on treatment, and that's there's still 2/3 of the Rett community who haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, and then of course there's more and more people being diagnosed each day.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, so that gives us a sense of the numbers there of who is using it, the retention.
Yeah.
It feels bad saying the retention rate like it's a subscription.
Yeah,
but So now we've mentioned this name. So that's DAYBUE, which is now underpinning the business and is creating the sustainable runway. We've mentioned NNZ2591 a few times.
Yep.
Now, is it in the same family of syndromes? So tell us specifically what it is. Yep. And at what stage you're at with this particular drug.
Yeah, so look, there's a close connection to DAYBUE, and that's one of the things which I think makes it much lower risk. Often when you've got a follow-on program, it's nothing to do with the first, then your risks are all the same again. We don't think they are here because it's closely connected. So as I said, both were invented at Auckland University all those years ago, and they're both involved in the biology of a critical growth factor in your brain called IGF-1, which helps to make new connections between the neurons and maintain the ones that are there, get rid of them if they're no good. So they're trying to achieve the same thing by slightly different mechanisms. So they're different molecules, but trying to achieve the same thing. So therefore, they are trying to treat the same sort of syndromes. So all the syndromes we're going after with 2591, they're different genetic origins to Rett syndrome, but the clinical outcome is very similar. And it's interesting. People say, well, why wasn't 2591 developed first? And, just an accident of history way back that trofinetide was thought to be a treatment for brain injury, and that's where everything went. No one had ever heard of neurodevelopmental disorders, so 2591 sort of got ignored. And it was really, the deal with Acadia took the execution of trofinetide away from us, took the funding away from us. They gave us some money up front, and we all had high conviction that 2591 could be better and could treat across all of these syndromes. So we went as fast as we could to get it to catch up, and that's been our singular focus since then.
So Jon, I'm actually on your website here.
Okay,
I've got the pipeline up.
Yes,
I just like a bit of an explainer here. So trofinetide, I've got the pipeline, and it's got all the different syndromes.
Yes,
and I've got the pipeline it's got Rett. Then next is Fragile X, then Phelan-McDermid, Pitt-Hopkins, Angelman, HIE, Prader-Willi, and SYNGAP1.
SYNGAP1, yep.
It's interesting, trofinetide, with DAYBUE, is actually linked with both Rett and Fragile X.
Yes.
But with Fragile X, it's just now in phase 2. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so Fragile X is something in fact, when we first started looking at Rett, we also started looking at Fragile X, so we ran a phase 2.
Is it fair to say that Fragile X is kind of, and this is what my brothers have, so I've got, it's funny, I've got a very long personal history with it, but nothing from an actual clinical perspective. Yep. Is it similar to Rett, but just the male version?
Look, it's similar in that you get this wide range of issues. I would say it's typically not as severe as Rett.
Yeah, right.
Again, there's a wide spectrum, so probably the most severe Fragile X might be, worse than the mildest Rett, but on average, no, it's less severe and less physically disabling.
Yeah, from what my experience, which is a a small pool.
Yeah.
It's definitely physical. You wouldn't doesn't come to mind at all. You wouldn't notice anything physically.
No, correct. So it's more behavioural and cognitive and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. So why is that being in the same drug?
Yeah.
In phase 2, is that just because of the trials were all done on we'll target Rett for these trials, and then rightio, now it's targeting Fragile X with the same drug at different stages through that trial, and so how they react to it.
Yeah. So again, we did the Fragile X trial at the same time as we did the first Rett trial, but then of course partnering with Acadia, we partnered. They took the rights to the drug entirely in all indications. So then it became up to them.
Oh, okay.
And it's still up to them. And to now they've chosen to focus entirely on Rett, which, to be honest, has served us very well because they've done a brilliant job with it and, had the great success they've had. But, yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame they haven't progressed. Fragile X.
Yeah. So does that mean that, say, people with Fragile X may not be able to get access to the drug eventually unless Acadia decide to progress?
Yeah, it does.
So it's got to be commercially viable for them.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
And look, they have the rights to NNZ-2591 for those 2 indications only.
For Rett and Fragile X.
Yeah, and the reason for that is, to make sure that we don't come and compete with them, obviously.
They need an incentive to drive that forward.
Yeah, and if I had both drugs and Fragile X in front of me, I'd be going after 2591, not trofinetide.
Yeah.
So if they're going to do it at all, that's what they'll do, I believe.
Do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. But we can't, can't make them do anything.
No,
so it's up to
of
them.
course,
so, yeah.
Oh, it's a bit.
So it's a shame. There are.
It's a bit shit, isn't it?
Yes, I'm sorry about that, but we'll see though.
Yeah.
You never know.
Right. Let's walk us through now NNZ-2591 because there's a number of syndromes that it treats.
Yeah.
Your Phelan-McDermid is in phase. It's just coming into phase 3.
Correct. Yeah.
Pitt-Hopkins Angelman is in phase 2, and then there's another, a handful of others that are in preclinical.
Yep.
So tell us about NNZ-2591. How many people in the world would be potential users of this particular drug?
So obviously, depends on how many of those syndromes make it through that process. But so with Phelan-McDermid, in theory, it's 2 to 3 times Rett syndrome. Pitt-Hopkins would be about the same as Rett syndrome, and Angelman slightly bigger. So even with those, you've just sort of got 4 to 5 times the patient numbers. And then if the others come on, then that could double again. So look, 2591 has some real advantages compared to trofinetide. So the dose is much lower, which means you don't get those GI side effects. So the other aspect here is...
So that adherence could be a lot higher.
Exactly. And it also makes it easier to manufacture and to distribute. Doesn't need cold chain, which trofinetide does. So a lot of advantages that 2591 has, which makes... And that's why we've gone for this strategy of let's get it as broad as we can across these different disorders that we think we can have an impact in. But at the end of the day, something's got to lead the charge, and the thing that is going to be the massive uplift in value for everyone is getting successful phase 3 in something. That's the thing that massively increases your value in that.
Right
so
now,
Phelan-McDermid is leading that charge.
Tell us a bit about Phelan-McDermid. I've not heard of Phelan-McDermid before.
Yes, so look, it's again another of these genetic disorders. It's the SHANK3 gene. Quite closely associated with autism. So most Phelan-McDermid kids would have had a diagnosis of autism, and unfortunately many of them will have just had a diagnosis of autism, a sort of superficial diagnosis, but actually they've got Phelan-McDermid syndrome. Again, it's like the others, a mixture of behavioural and physical stuff. So you have the same motor, both gross and fine motor, communication, behaviour, social interaction, cognitive ability, all impacted, and again to a varying extent across patients. One particular aspect of Phelan-McDermid syndrome is a sort of not understanding danger. So, can just running out into the middle of the road without understanding, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
That's a common problem. So again, what we're trying to do here with treatment is have an impact across all of these things. And we've seen, we ran this phase 2 trial which had great results. It was only 18 kids, but 16 out of 18 showed improvement. And in something like that, we saw some great improvements and some real. There's one particular parent who's recorded a video for us about their experiences and real positive impacts on their lives and on their boy's life, his ability to interact with the family and no violent episodes, which there often are, and being able to build things, and just amazing stuff to hear. So it's a similar story with Rett, just different type of kids.
These people that are in the trials, do they get to stay on it post-trial?
So look, they haven't so far, because to be able to do that, you've got to have certain,
because if they've had a game-changing, life-changing experience to stop that, and could be for a few years, that'd be heartbreaking.
Oh, you're right. And so in Rett, the mum I talked about, Caitlin was then too old to go into the next trials, and so they had to wait for years before the drug got to market, and they're incredible people that they've waited and, still fully supportive. Right. With Phelan-McDermott, so you have to have the safety testing done in order to be able to treat for long periods. And when we did the phase 2 trials, we didn't have that. We have now. So when we do the phase 3 trial, people will be able to continue treatment once they finish the trial. And so what we're going to do is the kids who are in the phase 2 trial, we're going to allow them to come into that continuing treatment, so they will be able to get the drug again. But they've had a hiatus, and unfortunately seen a regression. So yeah, it's not ideal, but unfortunately that's the regulation. So.
And you're choosing to take NNZ 2591 forward yourselves, not partnering with someone like Arcadia.
Yep.
That decision means you ultimately get to keep far more of that upside.
Correct. From
this much bigger drug.
Yes.
Are there any risks that you're then taking on? Because of course, I'm sure Arcadia was able to help with distribution, help with those getting through the FDA, have those relationships to push that forward maybe at a faster rate than a standard team would.
Yep.
So do you have those relationships now in place? Are you confident that you'll be able to do this at the same speed that Arcadia was able to do for you?
Yeah, so look, I think the commercial side of things is a whole different ball game, and we're not set up for that currently. We're still an R&D company, so we'll need to make a decision at some point. Do we turn ourselves into a commercial company? And that's a big change to the company. And we'd probably move it to the US and different people and so on. And so if shareholders want that, that's an option. The alternative is that we get it to the end of phase 3 and then we partner in some form with a bigger company.
Because that company's not taking that risk in the phase 3, though, and you'll bring essentially a finished product to them, you have much more power in that relationship.
Oh, correct. And the audience will be much bigger. So, all these pharma companies, they need sales and they need them soon. So if you've got a drug that's a year away from sales and the development is done, there will be many companies that want it. Whereas if you do a deal back in phase 2, like we did with Trofenetide, your audience of potential, buyers is much, much smaller, and you're right, you don't have the power in the relationship at all. So it is completely different. So that's, I guess that's our plan A, but the plan B could be to go down the commercial route if shareholders wanted that. So in the meantime, what we've got to do is make sure that we can take it to that stage. So we're a very different company now than we were when I talked about our 10 people if we were lucky. We've got about 33 now, which is still tiny. But we've brought people in who, on the clinical trial execution side and on the regulatory side, are much more experienced than what we had before, and have done this before in other companies. We've actually got a sort of a cluster of people who've worked together in one company in particular very successfully. So we've greatly upped our quality environments, a different quality, requirement when you're doing phase 3 trial. So we have made some significant changes to the company to be able to execute this. So we think that the risk, we've mitigated it as much as we can also in the design of the trial, which is very similar to the phase 2 trial, which was so successful, very similar to Acadia's Rett phase 3 trial, which was successful. So we think we've really reduced the risk as much as we can, but it's well worth taking that risk because the potential upside is massive compared to partnering now. So,
excellent. And I've actually heard you talk on another podcast about the discipline within the business. You've got this cash now. You've got this cash flow. You've got that security blanket, so to speak. How do you now, as a leader in the business, go about allocating that capital and being mindful of cash burn, being mindful that you've of how you spend that? Yeah.
So you probably know I'm an ex-CFO. So by even though I'm a scientist at heart, I'm an accountant by training. So I'm pretty stingy, and I still am. I've lived in Neuren in particular. I've lived through some real tough times where we had to watch every penny and take some severe measures. So I never forget that, and I like to instill that in everyone. We don't not do things that you should do. We absolutely do things, but I always try to get everyone with the mindset, do you need to do this? Is this really going to create value? And if it is, great, we'll do it. But you don't necessarily just accept the cost. You should be questioning it, and it's a bit of a cliche, but treat it as if it's your own money. And I think we do have that thinking pretty much through the business. So,
speaking of that, then, what's the alignment like? I know you're a shareholder, and you can go on to any brokerage account or the ASX announcements and whatnot and see that you are a significant shareholder in the business. But what about the other staff that are working on this? What are those incentives like for them?
Yeah, so look, funnily enough, I think our primary incentive for all of us, and the reason most of us are here, is what we can do for these families. I mean, really, I'd never worked in anything like this until I came to Neuren, and you very quickly get hooked into wanting to make a difference. And I think it's the same for everyone else. So that's almost the most important thing. I think the second thing is the way we work and the culture we have, I think is great for people, and I think they like that. But then the third thing, we certainly try and make sure that everyone has an equity stake in the future. So, we have an active options plan.
There's an options plan in place.
Yeah.
Great. So, and this is one for looking at you're looking at the share price.
Yep.
Obviously, there's what's happening in the business, and then there's the share price.
Yes.
And the two sometimes can be miles apart. How would you wish for people to think about your share price and the business, especially in those times of extreme optimism and pessimism? You were talking about a time period when, you announced the Acadia deal and the share price halved. Yeah. Obviously, the value of the business didn't halve. Yeah. It was just the expectations. Yeah. So how do you guys think about that, especially like talking internally with other staff members who are shareholders in the business too?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I try and shield most people from angst about that, other than probably me.
You're
and
probably still pulling out ComSec from their pocket though.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think we all have to have a longer term view than that. And the 2591 journey on its own has been incredibly volatile, and partly driven by, of course, sentiment on debut. But and things are never as good as they look at the peak, and they're never as bad as they look at the trough. And we have to just think, see through that and look at the longer term. And it doesn't have to be 10 years away, but certainly the longer term view. And with 2591, since 2019, we've had this strong conviction about the strategy and where we're trying to get to. And we all buy into that. And I think we all understand that's what we're getting to. So you've just got to, I worry about the short term ups and downs, but hopefully other people don't really, because their eyes are on the prize at the end of it.
So let's now, just to kind of wrap up a little bit here, with 2591, we've got it entering stage 3 for one particular syndrome. Yep. What does the runway look like? And from people who have been listening or watching this, they want to keep up with your progress, what kind of milestones should they be keeping an eye out for with this particular drug?
Yeah, so the phase 3 trial is obviously critical, as I've said. So you want to watch sort of in enrollment. So in fact, everyone said to me, all right, how long is it going to take? And you can't really be sure about that.
How long's a piece of string?
Until you, but once you're in the trial and you're recruiting patients, you can have a better view on that. But right now I've said, you've got a great surrogate out there, which is an objective one, which is Acadia's phase 3 trial in Rett. As I said before, it was very similar. So that took them 2 years from start to results.
Has the phase 3 started yet?
It's just kicking off now. We just initiated the first site. So it took them, that means about 18 months to enroll the patients. So we've got 160 patients. And then the last patient goes through their 3 months treatment, and then you analyse the results. So during that, if it takes 2 years, I'm hopeful we might do it quicker, but that's what everyone should have as their base case. Then we'll give updates on how we're going in enrolment, and at some point we'll be able to forecast when we think those results will come and when we think approval for the FDA might come. So
at the same time, can you be entering different phases, like phase 2 or also entering phase 3 for the 2591 for the other syndromes? Can you do them alongside each other?
We can, and we're going to do that. So I guess an ultra cautious thing would be don't do anything and wait for the phase 3 result. But if you do that, you've just lost time and opportunity. And the whole point about this was the power of this drug is
you want to get it into the market. You want to help people.
Yeah. But I'm also aware that I think if you get success in one and get it through the regulator, then I do think there's a bit of a halo effect to the others, and it may well improve the chances of the others and even improve the view of the data of the others. So we're two of them in particular, Pitt-Hopkins syndrome and HIE, which is the brain injury in newborns. We're going to start trials next year. We're just preparing for meetings with the FDA now so that they will be progressing. So when the Phelan-McDermott result comes and the FDA interaction happens, I'm certainly hopeful they'll get pulled along by that, and then hopefully some of the others too.
Fantastic. Jon, I really appreciate your time here today. It's been a really enlightening conversation around so many aspects of what Neuren does, and I hope the conversation today has covered off the business, but also covered off really well who you guys ultimately are trying to help at the end of the day. So a couple of lighter-hearted questions to answer. Let's finish on. We always ask for people on the podcast for the first time. We always ask 2 questions. I want to ask this one, which is, if you could go back and tell your younger Jon Pilcher self something about life, business, or investing, what would it be?
Yeah, I think there's something that probably applies to all 3 of them. I would say, if new opportunities arise, sure, make sure you do your due diligence on them. But then if you're sure about them, then go for it. Don't hesitate, hold back. Go for it.
Take those chances. Take calculated chances.
Yeah, say yes and put your everything into it.
Fantastic. And then this is a question I always ask. Me and you, we're going for lunch. The out of office is on. We're not going back. Where are we going? And it could be anywhere in the world. And what are we having?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Lunch is obviously food, and if it was food, then we'd be going for a seafood extravaganza somewhere. But I don't think they serve that where we're going. So we'll go to. It's a long way. We're going to go to Lord's,
right,
and have lunch in the pavilion during an Ashes test.
Fantastic.
So I hope you'll enjoy that.
Look, it depends on how we're performing.
And of course, remember, I'm on the other side of
the Well, what do they serve at Lord's in the pavilion?
Oh, apparently it's incredible.
Really? Well, have you not been?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
no.
First time experience for the both of us.
Yeah, we might have to bluff our way in with the funny ties, but we'll manage it somehow. So.
We'll figure it out, and I'm sure. Geez, I don't know what they'd be serving up there. But
apparently it's amazing. For the players anyway, it's this again, incredible stuff. So hopefully we manage to get that. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll see you there.
Okay.
Jon, thank you very much for coming in today and joining us. For staff, for shareholders, for the families that you're helping we wish Neuren all absolute every success that could possibly come their way. So I really appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. Great.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can get daily videos and podcasts on Rask's YouTube channel. Or if you want to enroll in a free course on investing, property, business, money, you name it, you can join over 34,000 other students and enroll in a free course on the Rask website. Simply head to www.rask.com.au and follow the prompts. Thanks for watching this Rask podcast.